Rivalry, history, passion, pride. This series explores football's bitterest clashes. This is Football Rivalries. Coming up, Red Rivalry. We investigate England's northwest clash between giants Liverpool and Manchester United. And there's no love lost in Lisbon. Benfica and Sporting's eternal fight to be top dog in Portugal's capital city.
Are you watching Manchester? Are you watching Manchester? Come on, Sixer!
With 5 European Cups and 18 league wins, Liverpool are the most decorated team in English football history. And there's one side in particular they like to remind. But Manchester United fans have their own boasts. John O'Shea's late winner at Anfield in March 2007 was crucial on their way to their 9th Premiership title win.
40,000 unhappy Scousers, it don't get better than this. Peace.
It's a killer blow, Alec.
Just another chapter in what's become the biggest fixture in English football.
You get brought up to dislike Man United.
Fantastic, you know. They hate us and we hate them.
It's the ultimate. I think Man United will always be the one that the fans want to beat.
Without doubt, it's the biggest game in England. The history of this club, the tradition of this club, and you got to say the history and tradition of Liverpool as well. The fact that they're, 20 or 30 miles down the East Lancs. It's just a huge game.
This is a rivalry that's all about those 30 miles, the distance that separates Manchester United and Liverpool, the two great dynasties of the English game. It's emotional, passionate and bitter when the two clubs meet. So what is the rivalry all about? Primarily, it's about football history. And these two have written their names indelibly in the annals of the English game.
We were successful in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and they, in the 90s, they won everything. And I think the rivalry sort of started in the 90s.
There's always been that intense rivalry with the supporters, purely I think because they were the team that we had to overcome in the 70s and 80s. And now with the boots on the other foot, we're winning the league so often, and Liverpool haven't won it for maybe 16, 17 years now, so you can sense the hatred there.
Liverpool were clearly the standout team in the 70s and 80s, dominated the domestic scene from a league perspective. In the 90s and beyond, it's been Manchester United. So I think both being from the same area, 30 miles apart, the rivalries got bigger and bigger.
There's jealousy from United supporters that this team from Liverpool, 30 miles down the road, that they could have so much success. And I think it was born out of Liverpool's success that I think the rivalry started to ferment and become what it is today.
But there is a deeper element to the rivalry. Both cities were giants of the Industrial Revolution. Liverpool, as the region's port, was better positioned than their neighbours. That was until Manchester built the ship canal that connected them to the Irish Sea and commercial opportunity.
If you look at the rivalry between Manchester and Liverpool as cities, you have to go back to the Industrial Revolution and the industrial competition between the cities, and things like the building of the Manchester Ship Canal, which was basically to bypass the Liverpool docks and bring goods straight into the heart of Manchester.
Both cities competing to be the powerhouse in the northwest, and Liverpool stole the march on us until we dug the ship canal and got bigger docks than Liverpool.
And Liverpool was a very rich and wealthy port, and Manchester at the other end of the Mersey was struggling a little bit, and they had to build the Manchester Ship Canal to get a slice of the action, so to speak. There's always been not just a rivalry, but a suspicion of, you know, they're muscling in on our jobs, etc. Football exacerbates it and exaggerates it.
The industrial heritage and, of course, the football has all led to decades of bickering between the players and supporters. Even the directors get into the argument, or should we say the regional humour.
We get on well. We work very closely together with Rick Parry on the Premier League, but on G14 or UEFA meetings. But certainly, you know, we both want to win. They're winners, we're winners, and it's you know, there's quite a bit of humour about it, but also both very competitive humour, shall we say.
Yeah, it's great. It's always a big battle.
The battle between the two clubs came to a head in one of the more recent matches. Gary Neville had taunted the Liverpool fans after a late winning goal, kissing his Manchester United badge just in front of them.
To be honest with you, I didn't know he'd done it during the game, but I haven't seen it on the TV. I think his reaction was a bit over the top. But you know, he's a passionate Manchester United supporter and a player, so when you do get the 3 points, you know, it's good to celebrate. But I think he went a bit over the top.
Well, I think Gary Neville was doing what I'd done if I'd have been lucky enough to play for United. I'd have gone up the other end and done exactly the same thing, if you bear in mind the foul abuse that he takes off Liverpool supporters week in, week out. I mean, personally, I don't have a problem with that.
Personally, I don't think either Gary Neville nor Stephen Gerrard with his comments did anything wrong whatsoever. And I'd much prefer footballers to actually care about the big local rivalries and what it means to the fans, rather than just be robots who, you know, treat every game as it comes.
While the industrial heritage still looms large, football has taken over as the major export. Nowadays, it's the great football managers rather than the industrialists who are celebrated here.
These are some famous portraits of the ex-managers. Obviously Bill Shankly, he's the one who got it all started. Bob Paisley followed him, really successful, won a lot of leagues and European titles. Joe Fagan was his successor. He was another successful manager. And then obviously the king, Kenny Dalglish, the best player to ever wear the red shirt.
Manchester United too, of course, have their legendary figures. Sir Matt Busby from the 50s and 60s, and Sir Alex Ferguson, who's had staggering success since the early 90s.
Isn't it fantastic to be from a region, the Northwest, and when you talk about great managers, if you look at those two football clubs, obviously Alex Ferguson now, but when Bob Paisley was manager here, and before him Bill Shankly, no wonder Liverpool and Man United have won as many trophies as they did.
Well, yeah, certainly Ferguson is out of the mould of Shanks and Bob Paisley and Sir Matt Busby even, you know, and Sir Matt, who played here at Liverpool. So they're a great. I think there's a great relationship, a healthy relationship. I think even between the clubs and respect.
The first of the Northwest super managers was undoubtedly Sir Matt Busby, who took charge of Manchester United in 1945. From then on, he made history with the Busby Babes. That team, though, was tragically ravaged by the Munich air disaster of 1958. Busby himself survived the crash and a decade later led a new United side to European Cup glory.
To rebuild a team from virtual scratch to become European champions in 10 years, I think was Matt Busby's greatest ever achievement. I mean, apart from the anguish of seeing the Busby Babes, you know, virtually a whole team destroyed, to get the sort of the spiritual willpower to do it, that was an amazing achievement. And I think that was one of the factors that made Manchester United so widely acclaimed outside Manchester.
United's fame has always fed the rivalry between the two clubs. And since the days of George Best, Sir Bobby Charlton and Dennis Law, Manchester United's name has carried that little bit of extra glamour.
It was a privilege to play against Man United then, because they had the likes of like Dennis Law, George Best, for goodness sake. You know, so to have played against them and when they were an unbelievable side. I mean, they were probably the top side in the country at that time.
But as Manchester United peaked as champions of Europe, Liverpool's star was still rising. The Beatles had made the city famous in the 1960s. Then in the 70s, Liverpool FC prepared to take over as the city's #1 cultural export.
Obviously the Beatles and the Merseybeat sound was taking over not just this country but the world, and that was echoed on the terraces. The Kop actually started by singing Beatles songs and singing the popular songs of the day.
Together with their anthems, the Kop and Liverpool embarked on an extraordinary period of domination. The Liverpool era was beginning, and the architect-in-chief was another Scot, Bill Shankly.
Well, it's all down to one man, Bill Shankly. He had a vision of what he wanted Liverpool Football Club to become. He wanted to create a bastion of invincibility at Anfield, which he did. I think he appreciated how important and how passionate the fans on Merseyside were. They worked with each other. He created 2 or 3 very successful teams, but it's purely down to Bill Shankly and the influence and the foundations that he set up at Anfield.
First Shankly, then Bob Paisley guided Liverpool to title after title, while Manchester United faded into relative mediocrity. For many in Manchester, the Liverpool success story was too close to home.
From their part, there was a great deal of animosity towards us because Manchester United had been this big football club, 50s, 60s, and then really it was Liverpool, late 60s, 70s and the 80s that had taken over. And there was a fair bit of animosity amongst the supporters.
It did hurt Manchester United fans, yes. They couldn't reconcile it with the image that they had of themselves as the top club in everything, bar actually winning titles and cups. Oh, they won the cup a few times, but they could not win the league. So Manchester United had a chip on the shoulder about it, really, and they didn't like it one little bit.
The rivalry was beginning to ferment, but the late 60s and early 70s were comparatively innocent times in English football.
I just think over the last maybe 30 years or so, things have changed dramatically. I mean, in my day, if we didn't win anything, we wanted Liverpool to win it, and vice versa. Because Bill Shankly and Matt Busby were big pals. And so there was a great relationship between the players. And to a great degree there was amongst the fans, but that changed in later years. Maybe somebody would have to be explained to me why.
The 1970s were scarred by football hooliganism. It was one compelling reason for the decline in North-West relations.
The sort of terrace disorder that you were seeing around those periods isn't going to make club rivalries any less. It's always going to exacerbate the rivalries. Famous incident in 1988 when the Manchester United team were CS gassed by Liverpool fans as they came off the coach.
I got CS gassed walking into the changing rooms. Quite a few of us got gassed, and a lot of the Liverpool supporters who were there as well, they got gassed.
It was very basic, this rivalry, if you like to call it. It was more than rivalry, hatred, I suppose.
On the pitch, Liverpool dominated. A successful period under Shankly became a dynasty as Paisley took Liverpool to new heights. His final trophy was won against Manchester United in the Milk Cup final of 1983. Captain Graham Souness insisted that Paisley himself went up the steps at Wembley to accept the cup.
Playing for Liverpool in those days, that was everybody's dream. They had dominated English football in the 70s. It was a wonderful time to be at Liverpool. It wasn't a case of you were guaranteed to win something, but it was near to it. And every season I was there, we did. We won something, at least one thing.
But they didn't have it all their own way. May 1977 and the FA Cup final. Liverpool were already champions and were in the European Cup final. A win could pave the way to an historic treble.
I think the Cup final, where we stopped them winning the treble, was an achievement for us. It was a foregone conclusion that more or less Liverpool would win the game, because they had a team that was going for the treble and looked well capable of winning that treble. I think it was a great occasion for the club.
While Manchester United celebrated the FA Cup, Liverpool travelled to Rome to face Borussia Mönchengladbach in their first European Cup final.
They'd been through almost a treble-winning season. It turned out to be a double. We'd lost to Man United, our dearest rivals, in '77 FA Cup final. So we were sick, getting on the train to go back home Saturday evening. But the spirit of Liverpool
was just incredible. And, you know, as it worked out, well, we won that night. And the first time is always special, I think, because, you know, you're making history for the club. And you're in the team, so you're part of the history. And I think it was absolutely unbelievable in '77. It really was.
Another key issue in the Manchester-Liverpool rivalry is that European Cup trophy. Liverpool have made a habit of winning it over the years, culminating in a 5th win in 2005.
This is the famous European Cup that we won in 2005, so it was for the 5th time we're allowed to keep the trophy. Really nice trophy.
Right now Liverpool have won that trophy 5 times, and United, arguably the biggest club in the world, have won it twice. And that's maybe, that hurts, I think, some people at United. I know it hurts. Sir Alex, you know, he'd love to have won it more than just the once.
Man United haven't fulfilled their true potential. You know, they've won the European Cup twice. We've won it 5 times, and that's something that they can't accept.
That's something that I think the Liverpool supporters get a great deal of pleasure out of pointing out.
5 European Cups, mate. 77, 78, 81, 84 and 2005.
It was Liverpool's golden era, and it seemed to go on and on. But blessed as they were with the most successful side England had ever seen, there were still a few worries about the old enemy.
Liverpool being Scousers, it wasn't really enough for them, I don't think. They still had that little bit of a chip on their shoulder and resentment about Manchester United.
I think the seeds of it were sown probably in the 1970s and 1980s, when Liverpool were by a mile the most successful club, not just in this country but in Europe. Yet their supporters always perceived that the media focused more on Manchester United. United were believed to have a little bit more charisma as a football club, if you like.
Manchester United, they've always been the glamour club, haven't they? And Liverpool hated them for being glamorous.
That created a grudge which became more and more bitter as the years developed, and I don't think we've ever recovered from it, to be honest.
And you'll get much the same opinion from the Liverpool fans.
Jealousy, that's what it is, mate. Jealousy. How can they have three United, a player and 2 managers United, and we've got the best track record in the world for 18 league champions and 5 European Cups and not 1 knighthood. Bob Paisley should have been knighted years ago. It stinks, mate.
Disasters at Heysel and Hillsborough in the 1980s hit the club. At the end of the same decade, Liverpool's tight grip on English football began to loosen. As a player, Graham Souness had felt the commitment that had made his club great. As a manager, he found that attitude changing.
Without criticising Kenny in any shape or form, felt that I inherited a group of older players who maybe had seen their best days. And what I was guilty of was trying to change things too quickly. And I couldn't get my head around people who would come to me, older players, and say, look, I've had an offer from this one or that one, I'd like to go. Because Liverpool for me was the #1 football club. Once you were there, you never wanted to leave.
As Liverpool faded, Manchester United were on the rise again.
I can remember Peter Robinson, who was the chief executive, saying to me when I was a player at Liverpool, if them down the road ever get it right, we'll all be in trouble. And by them, he meant Manchester United. And for him to say that, those words stuck in my head. You know, if them down the road ever get it right. And that's how it turned out.
I made my debut in 1990, and you know, that was at a time when the huge amount of success that they had was just coming to an end, and that just coincided with the Manchester United golden period as well. You know, Liverpool were coming to the end of their golden periods, with a lot of the players being older players, all having to retire and move on.
Trouble for Liverpool came in the shape of Sir Alex Ferguson, who arrived in November 1986. He would become a managerial great.
The first thing that Alex Ferguson did when he took over as manager in 1986 was not I'm going to make this club win the league championship, I'm going to do this and do that. His public utterances were, my target is to get ahead of Liverpool. I mean, it was as personal as that, and he picked up the vibes of that from the fans.
Sir Alex, when he came down from Scotland, he took over United. I think he saw Liverpool as the benchmark, and I think he based modern-day Manchester United, I think, on Liverpool in ways.
By 1996, United were the team to beat, as they reminded their great rivals in the cup final that year.
You're distraught to lose a cup final, full stop. But when when you lose it to maybe one of your fiercest rivals, I was gutted after the game. But of course, there always has to be a winner, and unfortunately, we were on the losing side.
In 1999, Ryan Giggs scored an unforgettable goal as United achieved an historic treble of Premiership, Champions League, and FA Cup wins. After denying Liverpool the treble in 1977, United could now celebrate their finest hour. All three competitions had thrown up obstacles, but in the FA Cup, Liverpool themselves had nearly knocked United out.
I mean, that was an incredible game, that, we see seemingly in complete control, and then at the time, United were popping up with late goals.
And that's just what they did. An equaliser from Dwight York with 2 minutes to go. Then Ole Gunnar Solskjaer fired in an injury-time winner to break Liverpool hearts.
I think it was just a little bit of luck here and there, a little ricochet here, goal there, and it was they just had that sign over us at various times in the 90s.
But while their rivals rued their luck, Manchester United were ecstatic.
Cup game here, I think it was the year we won the treble actually, where Liverpool 1-0 up and we come back in the last couple of minutes to win 2-1. You can't beat that for excitement.
The three trophies that United brought back in 1999 ranks as the club's finest achievement and puts Sir Alex Ferguson among the game's greatest ever managers.
Alex has proved that he is up there with anybody you want to name, and arguably by the time he's finished, be the greatest manager that's ever been. He would be the first one to tell you he needs to win another European Cup. But even if that wasn't to happen, he'd still be, certainly in my opinion and a lot of other people's opinion, maybe the best that's ever been.
Liverpool won the League Cup at United's expense in 2003 under Gerard Houllier, and greater success was to come. Rafa Benitez arrived and has won the European Cup and the FA Cup. Perhaps the glory days may be about to return.
It's the same when you play against United.
His record speaks for itself, his cup competitions, European Cup competitions. Likewise, he's done it in Valencia. He's come across to English football, and in 3 years he's achieved so much. And I think that says a lot for him. He's only been here a short space of time.
I think there's a feeling that perhaps Liverpool are just on the brink of maybe building something whereby we can get back maybe to the days that we enjoyed.
Well, it's exciting times, isn't it? New owners with the prospect of a new stadium. Rafa with a squad he's got now, which is playing in the Champions League. Money to spend to improve the squad. So yeah, I mean, to be a Liverpool supporter at this moment in time, it's attractive.
He may have learnt the game in Spain, but Rafa Benitez has been in England long enough to know what a fixture against Manchester United is all about.
No, we know that the passion in England is more than in other countries, and for me it's similar when you play Barcelona against Real Madrid. Top sides, winning trophies for years, and normally when you are in the top of the table or when you are playing for trophies, you will see normally Arsenal, Chelsea now, and United always. No, that is the rivalry for years.
One of the reasons that Manchester United have been right up there is their Portuguese star, Cristiano Ronaldo, who was well on his way to being named Player of the Year for the season.
Of course, it's a very important, it's a tough game, difficult game against Liverpool. Always, it's good. But I think you are in a good way. You play very well. This moment I hope to win. Everyone knows if you win, it's a big step to the win the Premier League. This is very important, and I think you have a great chance.
So the fans gathered for another Liverpool-Manchester derby. The calm before the storm.
Incredibly passionate. I think it's probably the most passionate derby, certainly in England.
Arguably the two best English teams ever meeting face to face.
the history of the two clubs, their success and the geography, they're so close together. I think it's just incredibly passionate.
We'll beat them. We're going to beat them.
Anfield is a difficult ground to come to for any team, but it's at its most hostile when Manchester United are in town. With Liverpool hoping to thwart United's title bid, interest in the match certainly wasn't confined to the venue itself. And in the closing minutes, Ronaldo fired in a free kick that Pepe Reina simply couldn't control. John O'Shea was onto it, and the points were United's.
That's the beauty of football. You don't know the result, and then against the run of play, and I think Alex was very clear on that, we got the last-minute winner from a relatively unlikely source in John O'Shea. To see that ball hit the back of the net, there was nothing better.
So another Liverpool-Manchester United derby had passed. But history between these two clubs has many interpretations.
The fact that we've still got all those European Cups and what have you still gives us the edge. And
I'm glad you said that.
Yeah, definitely we've got the edge, there's no doubt about that.
And we're winning, you know, I mean, the fact that we've got 8 premierships and they've never won a premiership, suits me anyway.
I don't know whether he actually said it, but it was reported that he said it, and it was Gary Neville and Ryan Giggs. And apparently they said that before they retire, they'd like to catch up with what Liverpool's achieved. And I thought to myself, well, he's not going to be playing when he's 130.
Still to come, history, passion and pride behind the Lisbon derby. Benfica against Sporting.
It's indescribable. Sporting are everything.
The Benfica fans are the best in the world. That's why we're the biggest club in the world. Benfica are bigger. We're gentlemen, they aren't. They're animals.
It's in their genes.
It's a feeling you can't explain. Being a Sporting fan is something else.
Sporting are bigger. Sporting forever.
We love this club more than anyone can love something. We give our lives for the club.
Benfica Sporting, or Sporting Benfica.
Benfica Sporting is the greatest sporting clash in Portugal. This game gets everyone going, and it divides the whole country. In Portugal, we say that Benfica Sporting is the derby of all derbies. It's the grandfather of them all. Sporting Benfica goes beyond the country.
The derby has great significance for everyone. It's a game everyone wants to play in.
The derby is the derby. It doesn't matter where you are in the league, it's still Benfica Sporting.
Lisbon, Portugal's capital and a goldmine of cultural history. But it's also a football city and home to two giants of the European game, Benfica and Sporting.
Sporting is the club of the aristocracy, the rich, and Benfica is the club of the people. And this fame grew. As people would say, whoever isn't a Benfica fan isn't a real man.
It all started here. Founded back in 1908, Benfica were the result of a merger between Sport Lisboa and Grupo Sport Benfica. It was a working-class club representing a working-class neighbourhood. But few people would have believed that half a century later, it would go on to become the colossus of Portuguese football.
Eram homens do povo.
They didn't have a lot of money. They were men of the people. They understood that Lisbon needed a popular club. What they didn't know was that they were founding a club that many years later would become one of the biggest clubs in the world.
Take a short trip to the home of Sporting in the wealthy Avelar district, and the difference couldn't be more apparent. Founded in 1906, backed by the Viscount of Alvalad's wealth, Sporting were very much the team of the elite.
Those who followed Sporting usually were of a higher standing. They were people from the army or navy, doctors, engineers, people closer to the aristocracy than Benfica fans were. This is the reason Sporting are viewed as such. Benfica were more of the people. They had more fans and followers, but Sporting were the aristocratic club.
It was the aristocrats of Sporting, though, who led from the front.
Nos anos 40 e 50.
In the 40s and 50s, Benfica were by no means the best team. It was Sporting. Their front five became known as the Five Violins. Incredible players.
Jogadores extraordinários.
Travassos, Peroteo, Albano, Jesus Correa and Vasquez, the Five Violins.
They were players who had great prestige, not just in Portugal, but Europe too. I had the great privilege of playing alongside them, notably Travassos and Albano. They were the top players in European football at that time.
But in the 1960s, it was all change. A footballing revolution was looming.
The 60s wasn't just the Benfica era either. It was the decade of the Beatles, a really great time. I think the 60s was the most important decade in the 20th century.
The swinging 60s were revolutionary in every sense, and Portuguese football was not about to be left out. The decade signalled a shift in power in the Portuguese capital and a golden era for Benfica. From being Sporting's poor relations, the club suddenly became a genuine force in European football. Their hero, a Mozambican immigrant known as the Black Panther. Everyone else called him Eusebio.
Eusebio changed everything. From the very moment he signed in the 1960s, Benfica became a footballing giant. At home, Benfica won twice as many games as Sporting. And that record was mainly down to the Eusebio era of the 1960s.
José Augusto was one of the stars of that team, as well as one of the world's first attack-minded fullbacks. Yet he's still in awe of the man whose blend of speed and raw power fired Benfica to the very top.
It was a privilege, an absolute privilege to play alongside Eusebio, along with all the other great players that Benfica had at that time. It was really an honour to have helped Eusebio have such a great career and to witness him become the best Portuguese footballer of all time.
After 15 goal-filled years at Benfica, Eusebio became a legend both for his club and country. But according to his childhood friend Hilario, he could easily have ended up at rivals Sporting.
At that time I spoke to the president of Sporting. I know this really good kid from my neighbourhood in Mozambique who you could sign. And the president said, no, I won't sign him unless he comes here and has a trial first. Obviously we used to give out trials so we could see if a player was any good or not. And so I went back to Eusebio and told him he could have a trial at Sporting. But he said no, I'm not going to have a trial because I'm better than the best player at Sporting.
Instead, Hilario's boyhood friend went on to win it all at Benfica. 2 European Cups, 11 league titles, European Footballer of the Year in 1965 and the European Golden Boot in 1968. Hilario remembers the Lisbon derby of that year well. He was marking Eusebio that day, lucky chap.
It was an attack that came down our right-hand side. I had the job of marking Eusebio. Eusebio got the ball, and when he got the ball, he looked up and he saw our goalkeeper Carvalho slightly off his line. So rather than shoot as he normally would, Eusebio clipped the ball just off the ground. And the next thing you know, Carvalho was picking the ball out the back of his net. And I felt guilty that I hadn't gone in on him and brought him down. I let him think, and he punished us.
Benfica's success in the 1960s went beyond a national level. They soon became the dominant force in European football, in the process breaking Real Madrid's grip on the European Cup.
Na década de 60, o Benfica está em 5 finais.
In the 60s, Benfica got to 5 European Cup finals. They won 2 and lost 3. And from that moment, Benfica became a force with fans all over the world, not just in Portugal. And the fans were mesmerised by the football that Benfica played.
That global dominance is still felt today. The Lisbon derby is watched by fans all over the world. Benfica claim to have over 160,000 associate members worldwide, more than any other club globally.
Benfica is the most important club in Portugal. In fact, it's more than a club. They say that in Portugal, over 60% of people are Benfica fans, while the rest divide themselves among the other clubs. Benfica was the first Portuguese club to gain a worldwide following.
It was here at Benfica's Stadium of Light that Lisbon's finest endured one of their more humbling moments. It's often said the better team loses the Lisbon derby. This was never truer than in October 1965.
Games between Benfica and Sporting tend to baffle you, because quite often the better team tends to lose. In 1965, Benfica had its great 60s team. I remember everyone saying, Benfica are the favourites. They're the better team, they're sure to win. But we were taken by surprise.
On a rainy autumn afternoon, Eusebio and his Benfica teammates were humiliated by Sporting. It was a game that has long prevailed in the memories of most Portuguese football fans.
What happened in this game was something unexpected, totally unexpected. It had rained a lot that day. Benfica also had a goalkeeper who was very good, but very small. And then we had Lorenzo, a very cool-headed player. He didn't get nervous. The derbies didn't shock him at all. On that day, he was simply inspired.
Lorenzo scored a fine hat-trick to lead his team to a famous 4-2 victory. Benfica may have been kings of Europe, but Sporting refused to give up local bragging rights so easily. Their reward, a great win, and they went on to take the title that year as well.
There is no favourite in a Benfica Sporting match, whether you're playing home or away. It's a case of seeing what happens, but there's no way of predicting the outcome.
Few clubs can claim to have Benfica's unique status. Everything is done differently, including their mascot. An eagle is released before kick-off at all home matches. It circles the Stadium of Light, symbolising the club's proud and glorious past.
When the opposition teams see that eagle flying, it can get to them. Because it's important to raise the confidence of your own team. When the eagle takes flight, the stadium is buzzing. It gets people going, gives the team a lift. It's very positive.
It's a way of showing the club's symbol, the eagle. And the eagle wasn't flying recently, but now she is. And I think Benfica will be flying too.
The week before a Lisbon derby is like no other. In terms of preparation and pressure, the match is the highlight of any player's season. The game against Porto is pretty big too, but the Lisbon derby is the one the players most want to win.
This rivalry, these derbies, they're built up by the press the week before, and everyone's talking about them. People are making bets as to who will win or who won't win. And all this influences the players, because as a player, you also live this hype that surrounds the derby.
In a country of 11 million people, 9 million are said to follow the two Lisbon giants. It's a game that attracts the attention of the whole country, and covering every second are Portugal's intrusive press.
Every journalist is looking for a different angle. Every journalist is looking for a different picture. And you have to be careful. You know, you have to be careful on Derby Day abroad, because you can't be seen to be stoking the fire in any shape or form.
Generally, people start talking about a normal championship game 2 or 3 days beforehand. But for a derby, it's 2 weeks before, so you're already preparing for it. Then the media get involved during the week, doing interviews, running opinion pieces. So all this makes the player prepare for the game differently.
As with any derby, the fans are the major protagonists. They feel this match like no one else. To win means to rule Lisbon for the next 6 months at the expense of your close and bitter rivals.
Obviously, the makeup of the stadium is totally different. There's a lot more fans. And so many people take this pressure that they feel in the week running up to the derby into the game itself.
And there can be few more incredible sights in world football than a sold-out Stadium of Light, once the biggest in Europe. It's no coincidence that the ground is known as the Cathedral, as fans come to worship before their heroes.
The atmosphere was crazy, really mad. Back then, there would be over 70,000 fans inside the Stadium of Light. It really was spectacular.
The old Stadium of Light was a very unique stadium, you know, a tier after tier that just seemed to disappear into the clouds. And when that was full, it generated a fabulous atmosphere. There were wonderful games to be associated with.
Following the glory days of the 60s, Portuguese football took a turn for the worse in the 1970s and 80s. Both clubs still dominated the domestic scene, but with the decline of the country's golden generation, neither Lisbon side hit the heights in this era.
In the 70s, Benfica and Sporting weren't at their best. Benfica still dominated in the 70s, but it was the start of a decline. Benfica and Sporting's football got worse in the 70s because the 60s generation was finished.
Most concern lay in the Benfica camp. Having been regularly among the world's elite, there was a sudden drop in standards at Portugal's biggest club. Back in 1980, a derby defeat and a third-placed finish signalled a new low.
The main aim for Benfica every year is to be national champions. 1980 was a year of transition. There were players at the end of their careers. Therefore, it was a bad period, and we wound up in third, which, as you can imagine, in terms of the fans, the club, the prestige, and even financial power, it was a catastrophe, a huge loss. But that's football.
During this period, a new force in Portuguese football emerged, this time from the industrial north. From 1985 onwards, Porto were finally able to break into the country's top two and transform the National League.
There was a feeling, because Benfica are the biggest club with the most supporters, that they were entitled to be winning championships. And a Porto from the smaller city and being the smaller club, they sort of ruined the party for Benfica at that time. And I think since I was there, Benfica have won a championship once, and Porto have been dominant.
Between 1984 and 1999, Porto won the Superliga an astonishing 11 times. Their dominance coincided with huge droughts for both the Lisbon clubs.
It's interesting to note that these 18 years of drought for Sporting coincided with the rise of Porto. Sporting won in 1982, but since then, Porto began to dominate and put together great teams capable of winning leagues and cups.
But Benfica and Sporting still managed to serve up some classics, notably in May 1994, a game that would ultimately decide that season's championship. The teams met at Sporting's José Alvalade Stadium and played out a 9-goal thriller.
We knew that if we lost this game, then it would be very difficult for us to be champions. And due to being away from home, most people didn't believe we'd go to the José Alvalade Stadium and be able to get a win. So there was a lot of expectation surrounding the game.
Sporting had assembled a team full of star names in a bid to win their first title in 12 years. Yet true to Lisbon derby tradition, the better team was far from guaranteed a comfortable win. Their illustrious neighbours had other ideas, in particular João Pinto, who was to get himself on the score sheet a record 4 times in Benfica's eventual 6-3 win.
We ended up losing 6-3. We had to win the match, so for me it was a really sad derby. We had such a strong, well-balanced team, but we lost a great chance to win the league.
A mini classic that suggested football was still very much alive and thriving in Lisbon. Yet it would be Benfica's last league triumph for over a decade. For Sporting, the wait would be seemingly interminable. Indeed, only in 2000, 18 years after their previous league triumph, was Sporting able to lay claim to being Portugal's premier club again. They did, though, repeat the feat 2 years later. After years of failed attempts, it seems Sporting were finally back to their best. Victory was made even sweeter by the fact their city rivals were struggling. Benfica hadn't won the league since 1994. But in 2005 they too ended their barren spell, largely thanks to a controversial derby victory late on in the season.
It doesn't bring back great memories, because we were still fighting for the title, and we ended up losing a game that we didn't deserve to lose.
Sporting may have had cause for complaint, but Benfica's win and subsequent league success signal that football in Lisbon wasn't yet ready to lay down and die.
Benfica went on to become champions because it was the last day of the season.
Despite the recent renaissance of football in Lisbon, there's little sign that either side will return to their former glories of the 60s anytime soon. Until they do, the considerable weight of history upon both clubs will continue to be a significant burden. The shadow of Eusebio and his celebrated Benfica team of the 60s may never be fully lifted. Now it's up to both clubs, and especially Benfica, to tap into this history to help Portuguese football re-emerge as a dominant force in Europe once again.
The
strength of Benfica is enormous because it isn't just a national strength, it goes beyond Portugal. And when Benfica gets a bit of consistency and is regularly in the Champions League or fighting for the title, then they'll definitely attract even more fans and gain more force. This in turn will give them more economic reward, so they can increase the strength of their squad, and so that sooner or later, and I'm hoping sooner, they can obtain the same sort of dimension that they had back in the 60s.
Whether that can happen remains to be seen. But one thing is certain, Benfica Sporting, with its passion and tradition, will live on as the main occasion here. Thank you for watching. Make sure you don't miss the rest in the series of football rivalries.